They thought the cameras would protect them. They thought the control room would silence him. They thought firing him live on air would humiliate him. But what they didn't expect were his final words. And those words didn't just save his career, they changed the entire network forever. Cameron Hayes had been the face of Channel 8 News for 6 years, calm/precise, unshakably professional. Viewers trusted him, ratings were steady, sponsors were happy, but inside the building, it was different. Behind the polished desk and bright studio lights, tensions had been building for months. Cameron had started pushing back. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make certain executives uncomfortable. He questioned loaded phrases in scripts. He asked for verification before airing viral clips. He refused to describe suspects using language that implied guilt before charges were filed. Some producers admired him. Others whispered that he was becoming difficult. 3 weeks before the incident, a heated editorial meeting ended with the news director saying, "Cameron, your job is to read what's written." And Cameron calmly responded, "My job is to tell the truth." That was the moment the atmosphere changed. On a Tuesday evening, breaking news hit. A teenage boy had been detained in connection with a robbery downtown. The newsroom moved fast. Producers pulled photos from social media. Chirons were written. A script was rushed to Cameron's desk. He scanned it, and his jaw tightened. The script described the teenager as a known gang of filmy. There were no charges, no confirmed record, just speculation from unnamed sources. Cameron pressed his earpiece. "Has this been confirmed by police?" A pause. "We're going with what we have," the producer replied. "That line implies criminal history," Cameron said quietly. "Do we have documentation?" Silence. "Read the script." Cameron, he didn't argue further, but he didn't look convinced either. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, red light on. "Good evening," Cameron began, voice steady. The story rolled. Halfway through he reached the controversial line. He paused, just slightly, barely noticeable to most viewers. Then he changed it. "Police have detained a teenager in connection with the robbery. At this time, no formal charges have been announced." In the control room, chaos erupted. "That's not what's written. He's off script." The news director stood up. "Cut to commercial." But it was too late. Cameron continued, calmly clarifying what was confirmed and what was still under investigation. The segment ended, commercial break, and the storm began. Cameron removed his earpiece as soon as the camera cut away. The news director stormed onto the set. "What was that?" he demanded. "It was accurate," Cameron replied evenly. "You defied the script. I corrected an unverified claim. You don't get to make that decision." Cameron stood slowly. "As the anchor, I absolutely do." The floor crew stood frozen. They had never seen confrontation happen on the studio floor. The director leaned closer. "If you can't follow direction, we'll replace you." Cameron didn't blink. "Then replace me." The control room was still live for a behind-the-scenes transition. Audio was partially bleeding into the broadcast. Viewers at home began noticing tension. The director made a decision that would change everything. "Fine," he said coldly. "Let's handle it now." He signaled the control room. "Bring cameras back up." The red light turned on again, unexpectedly. Viewers thought it was a continuation of breaking news. Instead, they saw Cameron standing beside the desk, and the news director stepping into frame. "This is highly unusual," the director said, forcing a tight smile. "But we believe in transparency." Cameron understood immediately. They were trying to make an example of him. The director continued. "When a journalist fails to follow editorial standards, there are consequences." The implication hung in the air. Cameron felt thousands, millions of eyes watching. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had seconds to decide how this story would be written. The director turned to him. "Do you have anything to say?" That was their trap. Apologize, submit, or unravel on live television. Instead, Cameron stepped forward slightly, looked directly into the camera, and spoke. "My responsibility," he began, voice calm but firm, "is not to a script. It's not to pressure. It's not to speed." The studio was silent. "It is to the truth," he continued. "If we label someone without charges, we don't just report the story, we become part of it." The director shifted uncomfortably. Cameron didn't look at him. He looked at the viewers. "If that commitment costs me this chair, then so be it. But I will not call a child something the law has not. Silence. Real silence. Not dramatic music. Not commercial break. Just a man standing in integrity. Then he added the line that changed everything. Because when we rush to judgment, we teach the world that fairness is optional, and I refuse to teach that lesson. The words landed like thunder. For 3 seconds, no one moved. In the control room, producers stared at monitors. On social media, clips began circulating instantly. At home, viewers stopped scrolling. The director attempted to regain control. We'll take a short break. But something unexpected happened from behind the cameras. One crew member started clapping, then another, then a third. The sound built, not loud, but undeniable. The director's expression hardened. Cut the feed. The screen went to commercial. But the moment was already viral. Within an hour, hashtags trended nationwide. Hashtag stand with Cameron. Hashtag journalism matters. Truth over ratings. Legal analysts weighed in. Former journalists praised him. Even competitors defended his stance. The network executives had expected compliance. They got conviction. By morning, sponsors were calling not to pull funding, but to support him. The teenage boy's family released a statement thanking Cameron for not mislabeling their son. Later that week, police confirmed what Cameron suspected. Wrong identity. No gang affiliation. No charges. If the original script had aired, the damage would have been permanent. The board convened an emergency meeting. Firing him now would look retaliatory. Keeping him without change would admit fault. They chose a third option. Public statement. Channel 8 reaffirms its commitment to accurate and responsible journalism. We support our anchor's dedication to verified reporting. The news director quietly resigned 2 weeks later. No ceremony. No explanation. Just gone. Cameron returned to the desk the following Monday. Same suit. Same calm presence. But something had shifted. Not just in the newsroom. In the audience. Trust had deepened. Ratings increased. But more importantly, standards improved. Scripts were reviewed more carefully. Language became more precise. Producers asked questions instead of assuming answers. Months later, Cameron spoke at a journalism conference. A student asked him, "Were you afraid?" He smiled. "Yes." "Of losing your job?" "No," he said. "Of losing my integrity." The audience stood in applause. Back at the studio, the red light still turns on every evening. Cameron still says, "Good evening." But now, those words carry weight, because viewers know something they didn't before. They know the man behind the desk is willing to stand when it matters. They tried to fire him live on air. They tried to humiliate him in front of the world. But his final words did more than defend a teenager. They reminded millions why journalism exists. Not for speed, not for spectacle, not for ratings, but for truth. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one voice refusing to bend. When the cameras turned against him, he didn't fight for his job. He fought for fairness. And in doing so, he didn't just keep his seat. He raised the standard for everyone who sits in one. What the public didn't see was what happened behind closed doors. Even after the network released its carefully worded statement, Cameron was called into private meetings. Not angry ones, polished ones. Let's avoid surprises in the future. We need alignment. We can't have on-air deviations. Cameron listened. He nodded when appropriate, but he did not apologize. Because what they labeled the deviation, he called responsibility. There were subtle consequences. Prime interview slots were reassigned. Special segments temporarily given to others. He was still the anchor. But the temperature in the building had changed. Some colleagues kept distance, not because they disagreed, but because courage makes people nervous. It forces reflection, and not everyone wants to reflect. Yet something else was happening too. Younger staff members began stopping by his office. Quiet knocks, quick conversations. One associate producer admitted, "I've wanted to push back before. I just didn't think we could." A field reporter said, "You gave us leverage. Now when we question language, it doesn't feel like rebellion." Cameron realized the moment wasn't just about him. It had shifted internal culture. And culture change is slow. but powerful. 3 months after the incident, the station hosted a town hall on media accountability. They expected mild attendance. Instead, the auditorium filled beyond capacity. Teachers, parents, students, community leaders, even critics. When Cameron walked on stage, the applause wasn't explosive, it was steady, respectful. During Q&A, a middle-aged man stood up. "I've criticized this network for years," he admitted, "but that night, you reminded me why local news matters." A young black father stepped to the microphone next. "My son saw what happened," he said. "He asked me why it was a big deal. I told him, because that man on TV showed what integrity looks like." Cameron swallowed hard. Those weren't ratings. Those were lives. Later that evening, backstage, a veteran cameraman who had worked at the station for 27 years approached him. "I've seen anchors chase fame," the man said quietly. "I've seen others protect paychecks." He extended his hand. He protected the profession that meant more than trending hashtags ever could. 6 months later, the network implemented new editorial policies. All crime-related scripts required documented sourcing. Descriptive labels required verification. Anonymous claims had to be explicitly identified as such. Training sessions were mandatory. And something subtle but historic happened. Anchors were formally granted the right to pause or request clarification during live broadcasts without disciplinary action. That clause, it was unofficially nicknamed the Hayes Provision. Cameron never asked for that, but it existed because of him. Meanwhile, the teenager from the original story, Marcus Reed, received a full public clarification from the police department. No charges, no affiliation. His name cleared. Cameron invited him and his mother back to the station, this time for an interview about media literacy. Marcus sat across from him, composed and confident. "What did you learn from all this?" Cameron asked gently. Marcus thought for a moment. "That what people say about you can stick," he replied, "even if it's wrong." Cameron nodded. "That's why we have to say it right." The segment aired nationwide. It became part of journalism school case studies, not because of scandal, but because of restraint. One night, long after the buzz had faded and the hashtags disappeared, Cameron sat alone at the anchor desk. Studio lights dimmed, city skyline glowing through the glass behind him. He replayed the moment in his mind. The director stepping into frame. The attempted humiliation. The pressure. He realized something profound. They hadn't expected him to stay calm. They expected emotion, anger, defensiveness. They had prepared for conflict. They weren't prepared for clarity. Because clarity is harder to attack. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't accused anyone. He simply stated a principle. And principles, when spoken plainly, are difficult to discredit. That was the true turning point. Not the clap, not the viral clip, but composure. 1 year later, same studio, same desk, new season opener. Cameron looked directly into the camera. "Good evening," he began. But before moving into the headlines, he added something unscripted. "1 year ago, this newsroom learned an important lesson about accuracy and accountability. We remain committed to earning your trust every day. Simple, measured, powerful, because in the end, they tried to fire him live on air. They tried to make integrity look like insubordination. They tried to show viewers who was in control. But control is temporary. The character isn't." His final words didn't just save a teenager's reputation. They reshaped a newsroom. They challenged an industry. And they reminded millions watching at home that truth is not negotiable. The cameras still roll. The red light still turns on. But now, everyone in that building knows something they didn't before. The most powerful position in the room isn't the one with authority. It's the one with conviction. And that night, conviction won.